Thank you very much, Tim. Okay. Yes, I was asked to summarize a theme that cuts across many of the chapters of the Arctic Adaptation Actions report that is in front of you, and I think this diagram will tell you why that is such a topic. Ecosystem services are, in a nutshell, the benefits that people receive from nature. So all the stuff that we heard about in the last couple of talks. But they are also a lens for linking ecosystems with society. So they allow us to relate to these changes that we are seeing and to nature in a better way. So we are all dependent in a way on the ecosystems and biodiversity of our environment, but we perceive these benefits as the services that we receive from this environment. Important to note is that the services are actually co-produced by nature and people. They are also reflecting our values and how we relate to the environment. That's an important point because it allows us to link very strongly, or better, I should say, between our decision-making processes and our values and the way we actually manage the environment. So that obviously has a huge relevance to adaptation planning, actually the whole rubric of how we plan for a society that functions within the ecosystems. So the AACA, what does it tell us? Well, it tells us that ecosystems are changing, as you have heard in the last couple of talks, and so are the ecosystem services, the way we relate to the environment, the way we benefit from the environment. It summarizes that critical ecosystem services are already affected by climate change, and that emphasizes the need for adaptation action. These critical ecosystem services are, for example, those that come as regulating services to the globe in climate form, or there can be others that are critical for livelihoods that are ecosystem-based, but also for education, our culture, etc. So what the AACA also summarizes is that society's ability to adapt may diminish through this erosion of ecosystem services that we are seeing and that we are projecting to come our way. There's a lot of a concern that our ability to make continued living based on intact nature is under attack through climate change, and that the ability to adapt to these conditions, to the changing conditions, is actually critically dependent on the services that we receive from nature. And as these erode, we might actually be hampered in our ability to adapt to the changes themselves. There's a whole economic understanding of ecosystem services, economic in the wider sense, that can be nature-based livelihoods all the way through all sorts of other economic options. But these economic values of nature that we link today and that we will have into the future, they really provide the capacity for adaptation, and they really provide the capacity for continued development. So these ecosystem services are important as a lens, help us adapt. There is a lot of concern, and I summarize that in this last point here, that we don't know enough about ecosystem services at this point. We are not able to recognize them so that they can actually help us making proper decisions on adaptation and development, especially cultural services and landscape services. The value of intact landscapes and seascapes are not very well captured. They are currently hardly recognized, but they are a key source of our capacity to adapt. So why is this important? Well, it is important because it leads us to action, and it leads us to actions that will come from many different places and many different communities of our society. I summarize a couple of important points here that come to us from the AACA. So recognizing the diverse values that are linked to nature and ecosystem services is important, as is capturing them in the context of planning, management, development, and adaptation. So that is not a trivial task. The recognition of these services is an interdisciplinary matter and one that links between different knowledge holders. Developing that capacity is a key task that is ahead of us. We need to develop the knowledge base, the capacity, and then sometimes even the methods, especially economic methods, to synthesize ecosystem services and provide prediction that allow us to make better decisions in the future. A critical part of ecosystem services is the nature where they stem from, so we have to really work hard to safeguard places and features that are sources of ecological resilience and where critical ecosystem services originate. There is a critical need as well to reduce the knowledge gap on culture and landscape services because, as I said, these are the ones that are actually helping us to adapt. I was also asked to summarize a chapter that I co-led with Marcus Carson from Stockholm Environment Institute for the Barents Region AACA report. It relates very much to how do we adapt to yet unknown conditions? How do we adapt if the future is inherently uncertain? The AACA Barents report summarizes it as ecosystems and people in the area face a complex and interrelated range of impacts from climate and other drivers. The future of these impacts, the very conditions, is not always very well predictable. So resilience should then be an objective of successful adaptation. Resilience, as it is understood to be the ability to respond to a range of future impacts. It is ultimately the best guarantee that communities will be able to adapt to Arctic change. So how do we actually prepare for uncertainty? The tool that we provide in our chapter is one that is a resilience indicator, as indicators help us to measure something that we value and value something that we measure. We looked at how to actually prepare us for that awareness of and to point to our ability to react to unknown conditions. We identified 5 fundamental qualities of human environment systems that will help us to indicate how well we are doing in our preparation to the unknown. These are change, accepting change as the norm. Uncertainty and surprise will come as a part of climate change. We should actually really cherish building and maintaining diversity. That means knowledge diversity, it means economic diversity, it means biodiversity. So we have something to build on, new things to strengthen. And we have to build the learning and knowledge as a means to anticipate the social and ecosystem consequences of our choices. Critical is the capacity for self-organization. That can be both the community capacity to steer itself in its social and ecosystem context, and also the ecosystem capacity for renewal to shocks and disturbance. And the last thing is really an indicator on the capability, tangible assets and activities that are required for livelihoods, our essential means of living. There's a tool that this will give us to actually embark on the road towards dealing with uncertainties in our adaptation actions. Tack för mig.